lot of American history that people think they know, they don't. Whether any of that comes out, I'm not even sure that the files that they have.
Do you think this is the next phase that we're going to find things out under his administration?
It's all in play.
Sir, we have an executive order.
He was threatened to be killed. And then this crate, he thought they were transporting drugs. No, those are human assets in it.
If we release these, how big of a disruption will it be to the world? It's chaos on top of chaos.
So let's just say that the people I've been meeting with since the election who are around central to the administration, number one, don't know anything about the subject.
I mean, this is bigger than preventing Big Pharma from advertising on TV.
Oh, this is massive, but also, what's the human future without it? You know, he offered me, personally, in May of 1992, $2 billion if I would join his team and not do what I've been doing. And, you know, I was in my 30s, and as a young doctor, I thought, well...
You know how hard that is to believe?
Anyone who's seen Unacknowledged knows more than the people around the president on this.
Such as who? Just a few days ago, we hear from a Congressman Burchett saying that there's possibilities of underwater UFOs. Underwater UFOs, yeah, and they move at 100 miles an hour, and they're massive, and this, and that. So today, Stephen Greer gave his perspective on that. We also talked about how Stephen Greer, his entire life's been dedicated to UFOs, unidentified objects. All these things is what he's been, committing his entire life to. So I said, how confident are you that Trump's administration, with Ratcliffe, Hexet, others, are going to pursue this? His answer wasn't what I expected. I also selfishly wanted to ask him a little bit more. I showed him this clip, a deleted footage of the 1969 moon landing, wanted to get his reaction to it, where you'll see something happens on the back end. And he gave me a complete different story on what he thinks happened to the moon landing, which I think you'll get a kick out of. Having said that, if you love Stephen Greer's work and what he talks about, you know what kind of an audience you are. If you like that kind of stuff, you're probably going to be glued to the screen today. And I challenge him on something about the fact that somebody offered him $2 billion from the U.S. government, a 2-star general. I pushed him on a little bit. You'll see what his response was on why somebody from the government would give you $2 billion or offer to give you $2 billion. Having said that, I think you're going to enjoy this podcast here with Stephen Greer.
30 seconds.
Did you ever think you would make it? I feel I'm supposed to taste sweet victory. I know this life meant for me.
Adam, what's your point? The future looks bright.
My handshake is better than anything I ever signed. It's right here.
You are a one of one?
My son's right about
I don't think I've ever said this before.
So we're back at it again. This is what, 3 or 4? I think it's one of them, right? We've
3.
done a few. This is 3. Fantastic. Yeah. And last one we talked about the Secrecy Act of, 1951, right?
Right?
The Invention Secrecy Act of 1951, because the documentary that you did, what was the documentary called?
The Lost Century.
Lost Century, which was fascinating to me. I had everybody around me watch that documentary, and fascinating. Today, you have some sensitive things you want to share with the audience, sensitive and confidential. You mind if I show them this folder? If you want to just kind of,
go ahead, sure.
You have some sensitive and confidential things that we're going to go through, okay, because of what we're going right now with new administration being in there. I'm curious to know what new updates you have. A lot of weird things have been going on. Some will call them psyops.
Yep.
Some will call them a regular Tuesday. But from the moment last time we were together was what, 5 months ago, Rob? It's
something like that.
Something like that. Let me see. A lot's changed since last time. Is what the point I'm trying to make. So, what is new? What is the latest with things that are going on with Trump, specific to the topics you and I discussed last time?
Well, in advance of the election, there was a team of people who worked at black sites or covert sites dealing with UAPs. They first reached out to me in spring of 2023. But as things went forward, they decided they were going to move out of those legacy, they call them legacy programs, dealing with UFOs, which are illegal projects. And they know they're criminal and illegal projects, and come forward. Now, initially, they were going to come forward just with evidence. They have a whole tranche of evidence because they've been pilots and people on the crash retrieval of picking up the non-human craft, the extraterrestrial vehicles, and they have then transported them, and they were the transport and security team. So they have people that apparently there's 6 black sites they've been working with. They went from initially wanting to just release all that information and data, which is what our thinking was until November. And then they decided they would come forward publicly. So the first of them has recently unmasked himself, Jake Barber, and a couple of other guys. I've known them for about a year and a half, a little over, almost 2 years. And they're people who have had hands-on with the crash retrieval of these objects. Now, they're not wanting to release much evidence. They released a few seconds of it, one of his colleagues, not his, but Jake Barber's colleagues, picking up an egg-shaped extraterrestrial vehicle out of the desert, which I sent to you. Now, that was one of many retrieval operations. So the teams that do these retrievals are tasked with not only retrieving non-human craft, but when we have a sensitive classified aircraft go down, they also work on retrieving those. So I had been before at his site. So September of 2023, I went out there with the director of a special access project under law enforcement to see what they had out there and fly over that facility, and actually was able to go over. This is a very interesting. It's in the material I gave you. This is from a shot right above the underground opening where man-made UFOs come up out of the ground.
And where's that located at?
This is the Lockheed Skunk Works out in the Edwards complex in, where Edwards Air Force Base is, in the high desert.
Right.
So you have out there, you have the Edwards complex that includes Edwards Air Force Base. To the south, you have the Lockheed Skunk Works facilities and the test range. And to the north, you have the Northrop Grumman test range, the Tejon Ranch. Now, I've known about these since the early 1990s, before this gentleman and his team were assigned there. That was only about 20 years ago. But those are key areas for a couple of operations. And he has admitted to some of this publicly already. One is the tracking and targeting of the non-human craft and the interception of them, and then striking them with electromagnetic pulse weapons that bring them down. Sometimes they crash hard, sometimes they're settled down pretty softly, and they're intact. So both occur. And at one site that we were in, I was told that about 1 or 2 of these non-human craft are brought down every year. Now, that site's been operational for about 40 years, since the Reagan era. At the other site, a similar number. So they're about, I'm not sure how many miles apart, in the high desert out there, the Mojave Desert. So I've been in a number of these sites. We know they exist all over the world. I know that the president and the people in Congress, when I first returned from that and gave them the footage of, because I took my own footage of this opening at this black site. The Senate Intelligence Committee guys didn't even know it existed. And this is one of the problems. So you have operations going forward. I mean, the pop culture term now would be deep state, I guess, from very secretive covert programs where neither the president nor the Congress are adequately briefed on it, which is very dangerous. And we'll get into why this is so dangerous. Luckily, there are people now coming forward from that world. And, we did not expect them to come out and name themselves because that's extremely dangerous. There has been a fatality in the team.
How recent?
Recent, the last few months. And so, we know that this is serious stuff. And, I take it very seriously. They do. So they're being very careful. So they have enormous amount of evidence that's being held back pending the executive orders from the White House and the new president, as well as some actions from the Congress that we've been recommending for quite some time. The irony of this, if you go into our archive, anyone can do this. You can go to Disclosure Project Intelligence Archive, DPI, archive.com, And if you go to dpiarchive.com, we've scanned in, enormous quantity of material from 35 years of research. So as a medical doctor, I looked at this, and as a scientist, I said, what do we need to put out there so that people, if they can get on the internet, can discover all of this? And it's there. It's all sitting there. So you'll see that even back in 1993 and 4, I briefed the director of the CIA for Bill Clinton in 1993 in December, because he took office in January of 93. By 94, 95, Clinton had stood up, Bill Clinton, the president, had stood up an operation to try to get to the bottom of this, which was not successful for reasons I can go into, which is tragic, actually. But the recommendations that we have released that were my recommendations to the Clinton administration are virtually identical to what we've just transmitted over to Mr. Trump. And yes.
How different do you think, and maybe why, how different do you think the President Trump's administration will approach finally, hey, we're going to find out about John F. Kennedy assassination, MLK, RFK. Do you think this is the next phase that we're going to find things out under his administration? And if yes, why?
Well, I'll tell you, it's all in play. So let's just say that the people I've been meeting with since the election who are around central to the administration, number one, don't know anything about the subject, which is dangerous.
The people that are directly working with them don't know anything about the subject.
Anyone who's seen unacknowledged knows more than the people around the president on this.
Such as who?
I don't want to get into names, but they're completely...
Well, I would want to know, whose jurisdiction would this be under?
Well, obviously, it'd be under Homeland Security. It would be under the director...
Hexet, or...
It'd be under SecDef. It would be under Hexet. It would certainly be under the Director of National Intelligence. It would be under the Attorney General because of law enforcement issues in the continental United States. Now, it would also cross the desk of the National Security Advisor, Mr. Waltz, and it would be certainly important for the incoming DCI, the CI Director, Ratcliffe. Now, Ratcliffe, my understanding is, does have some knowledge about this from the legacy operations, but it's something that he's trying to figure out how to handle. But we do know that there are also very good drafts of the executive orders to help make this happen smoothly and give amnesty to a number of these whistleblowers, but also amnesty to people who have been in these, what they are called legacy programs or illegally run programs from the past. It started in the 40s and 50s, and have a glide path out for them where they wouldn't be prosecuted. And I've been in favor of that for a long time. Now, I have colleagues who think, no, you have to go after a pound of flesh. I said, no. I said, an eye for an eye will make the whole world blind on this one, because you're dealing with a group of people who have power that exceed that of the White House and the normal Pentagon operations, because they have reverse engineered technologies that are thousands of years in advance from extraterrestrial vehicles. You do not want to get into a shooting war with that kind of operation. So our recommendation is to identify the people that are now starting to come forward who've been in these legacy programs. They know they've been run unconstitutionally and illegally, and create a pathway for them to come forward safely, be protected both physically but also legally. Now that's going to take the new FBI director and more importantly the Attorney General to work out, Pam Bondi, assuming she gets confirmed. And it will certainly take some executive orders from POTUS, from President Trump. So at that point, a lot can happen very, very quickly.
Where do you see the level of interest in wanting to know this? Because everything is about the level of interest of an administration, right?
Correct.
Where's the level of interest with them?
Well, look, in the couple of months since the election, right? I mean, it's been just chaos trying to put that together. And so I have gone to various meetings to provide information initially, and I know others are doing that. Unfortunately, some of the others doing it are known counterintelligence operatives who are providing false information. So I, briefly had a quick chat with Don Jr. at a meeting, and he had been taken in by a known counterintelligence person named Lou Elizondo, who is someone working to intercept these whistleblowers and then turn.
You seem to be a big fan of his. It's what I hear.
No, Elizondo is a paid disinformation person. And
How convinced are you of that?
100%. I have an email from the top guy at the CIA who was there when Ronald Reagan wanted to know about this when he was running for governor, who was a very young postdoc, and he immediately wrote and said this is what he's doing. Now, recently, Mr. Elizondo has started saying more correct information. Initially, he said, all of these objects out here, we don't know what they are or how they fly. Now he's admitting we have the man-made ones. And I'll tell you, the mass majority of the UFOs people see, they're not from outer space. They're not alien. They're ours. But they have dangerously been used in false flag operations and deceptive operations, what the Pentagon calls a deceptive indication and warning, or deceptive INW. The pop culture would be false flag, which means you just set up a decoy, you set up a false operation. So that was his primary responsibility when he first emerged, was to gaslight officials, gaslight Congress, and intercept witnesses.
That's a job, right?
It's a very big job, and there are a lot of people like that out there in what we call the legacy UFO subculture. They're embedded. I mean, they're not going to wear a sign that say, "Hey, I'm from, this operation." But
is it an actual, is there actually a undisclosed division where your job is to gaslight and confuse people, or is it
absolutely,
or is it everyone's job to gaslight and distract? Because like the opposite of a marketing, how like the propaganda book that was written,
right?
The opposite of marketing, which is you're marketing a lie to confuse the American people, so they're looking here versus here. You're saying there's a division of people that do that intentionally.
Yes, it's a whole counterintelligence, psychological warfare operations out of CIA and other agencies, and that's what they do. And I've known some of these players since the early 90s. One of them that had been involved back in those days was had been head of special forces and Army intelligence named General Albert Stubblebine, and he offered me personally in May of 1992 $2 billion if I would join his team and not do what I've been doing. And I was in my 30s, and as a young doctor, I thought, well,
$2 billion, Steve.
Yes.
You know how hard that is to believe?
Oh, I don't care. Put me under a lie detector. Ask my wife. We're having our 46th anniversary this year. That's what happened. Then he approached her. But you have to understand the money involved. Why is this so secret? It either exists or it doesn't exist. It does exist. How could it be kept so secret? And this is a long discussion to get into of what the modus operandi is of counterintelligence on this. But, it's through bribery, blackmail, threats, wet works, targeted killings, assassinations.
You know why $2 billion is hard to believe? Because the only reason he would have gone to $2 billion is because you kept saying no to 50 million, 10 million, 100 million, 200 million, and it eventually goes to $2 billion.
No, because they knew, okay, let's cut to something that's very controversial. This is what's starting to come out through these black sites where they have operators that target the non-human craft. So if you go back to 1991, I published a paper called The Comprehensive Assessment of the UFO/ETI subject, extraterrestrial intelligence subject. It went all through the intelligence community and the aerospace community. And part of in that paper was a description of the technologies that are non-human, where they interface with very advanced electromagnetic fields for communication with thought. It'd sort of be like what Elon Musk is trying to do with Neuralink, but without the speed of light, where there's a direct interface between the conscious field and thought and a machine. That is how non-human civilizations can communicate across the vastness of space-time, and it's done through a trans-dimensional electronic system. So I knew this in 1973 after I had a very close encounter with these civilizations. So when I wrote this paper, I described it as in two directions, TAC and CAT. So technology-assisted consciousness, where you have a technology like the headset you're wearing, that would augment your own conscious abilities. And everyone's heard of those CIA remote viewing programs and things like this, where they were using people like Ingo Swann to see with consciousness, like psychic spying, psionic. And a lot of people laugh at that. And I said, no, it's a legit science, and it was done for 30 years at the CIA with a team of people. I know quite a few of them. Now, imagine having a technology that augments that capability. Then reverse it. Then imagine that there's the other way around, where you have your own consciousness can augment a technology. So it flows both directions, from technology to mind and back. Now, what is that? Now, the science of consciousness is very controversial, but people like Dr. John at Princeton started the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Group, the Peer Lab. And they were able to prove, through using quantum machines, random number generators, that people could just sit and put their awareness on this type of machine, and it would shift the curve of whether it was spitting out zeros or ones. It was just a digital machine, right? Spitting out, it's a random number generator is what it's called. And they were able to prove to a scientific certainty that that's true, that there's field consciousness. Now, we're taught in science, and I'm speaking now as a doctor, that it's all locked in our skull and our brain. But there's something that is beyond that is consciousness. And some people say, oh, it's spirit. Well, you can call it whatever you want, but it's the consciousness field, and it can be scientifically accessed. So what they decided back when this was discovered in the 40s and 50s was to figure out how that could be used for communications and also tracking of the NHI, non-human intelligence craft, or ET craft. So I had developed my own techniques for doing that. If you look, we have an app called CE5 Contact that teaches this. And a lot of people go, that's pretty far out stuff. I said, well, what do you think you're dealing with? You're dealing with Ma Bell when you're dealing with an interstellar civilization that's 100,000 or 1 million years more advanced than we are. So I think that, one of the big problems is the gap between current science and technology and what's known in classified programs dealing with this. So the head of Army Intelligence knew I understood all this. And I guess they had people seeing what we were doing and that we had successfully made contact with these objects. Famously, the first one that was publicly known and published was in Pensacola, where we had 60 people out, and we were using this technology to make contact, and then 4 of these craft pop into the sky. One of them ended up on the front page of the Pensacola paper. So it was then that these guys surfaced, General Stubblebine and some other people. So I think the value, I don't think I'm important in this at all. I think
I'm still stuck on $2 billion because to me,
that's nothing to these guys.
Well, but no, hear me out. Rob, can you pull up the Stubblebine fellow, if you don't mind? Fun fact about this guy, he was born on February 6th, and he died on February 6th. And Ronald Reagan was born, I believe, on February 6th. If you can go up to, so here's this is the person that offered you $2 billion.
Correct.
So U.S. Army general, active duty, spent 32 years, beginning an Army officer, later on, intelligence, he's credited redesigning U.S. Army intelligence. Over the course of it, he became widely known that he maintained a keen interest in psychic warfare throughout his career. He sought to develop an army of soldiers with special powers, such as the ability to walk through walls. Whoa.
Yep.
Okay, interesting.
Yep.
So U.S. Military Academy, 1951, Columbia University. So he's an educated guy. Go a little bit lower. Army officer, military intelligence, got it. Lived to 87. Awards, Distinguished Service Medal, Legion of Merit and Bronze Star, Air Medal, Respect, Cold War, Vietnam War, Invasion of Grenada. Okay, so this is qualified as it gets. A key sponsor of Stargate Project. Maryland someone was convinced of the reality of a wide variety of psychic phenomena. Keep going lower, Rob. His interest at the bottom, he was interested in UFOs and
psychology.
Parapsychology, was a member of Oath Keepers. He and his wife, Rima, were active in Patriot Movement and appeared together guests on Alex Jones' show. And they established a nonprofit organization called Natural Solutions, which disseminated conspiracy theories about vaccinations, pharmaceutical companies, and genetically modified foods. 9/11, he claimed the airplane did not crash into the Pentagon. believe that an airplane did not crash in Pentagon on September 11th. He said he did not know what did, okay? And then on the bottom, the swine flu, he believed, was a genetically engineered virus that is part of a World Health Organization scheme to sterilize untold number of people. So he offered you $2 billion. So,
well, he was representing a group that had that access.
So you were 30 years old. They wanted to give you $2 billion.
No, in 92, I would have been 36.
36 years old. Mm-hmm. So when he offered, so you know why that's tough? You ever seen the movie Horrible Bosses, where they say, hey, we're trying to kill our bosses. And he says, you got to go talk to motherfucking Jones. And they go, and the guy they're negotiating with, he says, hey, we want to take out our bosses, $50,000. And then he says, $500, I'll do it, and it kind of goes to the bottom. It's like, for a person to go from zero to we'll give you $2 billion for this, it's truly, the word is unbelievable, because somebody would offer $100,000, $500,000,
well,
$1 million.
They knew it, that none of that amount would have mattered. They thought if it was large enough and had real power behind it, because they had money from the collapse of the Soviet Union out of Eastern Europe that they had confiscated through these black programs and rather criminal tentacles that they were operating. Later he left all that behind. So I'm talking early 90s here, not what he did, in the 2000s. But they had the ability to do that, and I think they thought I would be more trouble than they wanted to risk. And I think they really wanted to get people involved in their projects that they could control, because money controls people. And this is why I've always rejected offers of money or position or power, and do to this day. But that's not often done. And I guess they had a reading on who I was as a soul or a person, that it would have to be a big number to move me. And although I must say, when he went behind my back to my wife thought he was so nice. And I said, yeah, devils speak with forked tongue, because of my grandmother's Cherokee. But
so you try to charm your wife?
Yes. Yeah.
And what did he say that maybe your wife came to you and said, baby, you should consider this?
Well, there's a lot of flattery, the usual things that con artists and people like that do.
So you would call him a con man?
Well, on this, certainly. I mean, but he was an operator. He was someone who was operating with a number of other people who are still around today, some of them, working that issue, trying to divert people who could be a little bit too much trouble. As Gordon Croydon said, who used to publish Flying Saucer Review that Prince Philip and Prince Charles would get. He told me when we interviewed him at his cottage in England, he says, people who are a little too much trouble, we just can erase them, and get rid of them.
Yeah, because when you say $2 billion, it's a lot easier to get rid of you than pay you $2 billion.
Correct.
If they have, if a person has enough power to approve a $2 billion bribe, that person also has the same enough power to also eliminate you.
Correct.
So why waste $2 billion?
Well, and those attempts happened after that. But anyway, I don't want to get too much into that part of the person. My personal story is not, it's a tragic story, actually. But so there's no point in rehashing 30 years of that. We don't have time. I think a more important issue is who has access to that kind of black money, and what will they do to keep it secret? That's the only reason I brought this up. So everyone thinks, oh, well, it's a $50,000 bribe. The amount of assets that this organization, it's a transnational criminal organization. It's not just U.S., it's global. And their long game, which is, I think, about to happen. I'll just say, give you a preview. There's two ways this comes out. It comes out truthfully, and it's quite clear that these non-human intelligences and craft are not hostile. If they were hostile with the technologies that they have, we'd be gone. We would have been gone in August of 1945 when we detonated the first atomic bomb. It had been over. However, they have spent a lot of money and time over the last 70 years staging, false alien threats. So let me start ticking these off for you. The abduction syndrome, totally a staged CIA and other corporate event. One of the men that we have who come forward recently was abducted by a Raytheon triangular craft, he and his wife, and suffered terrible injuries back in 2000, 2001. So that is not in dispute. We can prove what I just said. The animal mutilations everyone hears about, those are 100% man. Those are human. They're all portrayed as alien. Then you have the sort of frightening stories of these objects being down in developing world countries, blowing up a whole village. That's us. We've done that. Now, how are we doing it? Well, here's just one example of a man. Now you can see this. This is in the flash drive I gave you. Mm-hmm. So this is a craft that Mr. Herrera was on a Marine platoon, and this was in 2009 in Indonesia. They were on a humanitarian mission. So they go out there. I wanted to bring Mr. Herrera here, but he had a work conflict. And he and his 6 guys went off in a direction, came across in the jungle that object, this. Now, there's a black and white version. We have a color. But the point I'm making is this object, man-made, staffed with some kind of covert human operators without proper military insignia. And in the crate there, we found out from this new whistleblower, because he was at that conference at the National Press Club in June of 2023 when Mr. Herrera disclosed this. He was threatened to be killed by all these guys who were there. And then this crate, he thought they were transporting drugs. And then this new whistleblower came up and said, no, those are human assets in there. These are people that have been taken to be trained as a psionic operator. And a psionic operator is someone who, they pump them up full of drugs. Most of them end up dying or end up in a coma. Some of them survive. And they're used to use their, what I was talking about before, consciousness and thought to latch onto the guidance systems of a non-human craft. And people say, this sounds like science fiction. Yeah, well, you're not dealing with a Boeing 777. You're dealing with civilizations hundreds of thousands of years more advanced with technologies commensurate to having socially, spiritually, and technologically evolved for that long and not blown themselves up like we're about to. So those civilizations are at that point where they can have thought, consciousness, mind, technology interface as easily as you and I pick up a cell phone and talk, which would have been magic. One thing I tell people, step out of this little slice of time we're in and realize if you were to go back to Thomas Jefferson and show them your smartphone and video conference someone, well, if you were in Salem, Massachusetts, you'd be burned at the stake as a witch because it would look like, witchcraft. To us, it's an everyday thing. Flipping on a light switch, no one thinks about it. It'd be magic to someone 1,000 years ago. So imagine, now let's extrapolate that technology curve into the future, a few 100,000 or 1 million years. What do you think you're going to have? You're not going to have what everyone's expecting. And this is the blind spot of scientists, frankly. They're always looking at right now or in their rearview mirror. And when you're encountering a civilization's non-human intelligence is this advanced, you've got to put everything you know on a shelf because we don't know anything. I mean, we're like half a step out of the jungle scientifically. But these covert engineering programs that started studying this back in the 40s and 50s, they have all this. I mean, they have figured all that part of it out. And however much you think is sitting out there in the desert, it's 100 times more. Ben Rich, you remember Ben Rich? He was the director, the president of the Lockheed Skunk Works. So the week he died, he had a conversation with a colleague of mine, James Goodall. And Jim Goodall is a very renowned aerospace historian and a mainstream author. And Ben Rich and he knew each other. So he called him up. He was very close to death, had cancer. And Ben Rich says he asks, well, what do you really have out there in the desert? And Ben Rich says, anything you can imagine, anything you've seen on Star Trek or Star Wars, we have it. We've already done it. It's out there in the desert. He says, but not Area 51. And he was talking about in the underground facilities connected to this. So what that opening is connects to a place called the Ant Hill, which is to the east out in the desert further, and goes underground through a series of bases. They're known as STIFs, subterranean facilities. Some people call them DUMBs, deep underground military bases. And they're connected with underground tunnels. I actually have in my archive the patent for the machine that made those tunnels. that are made by various contractors like Bechtel Corporation and some others that I know. So those facilities have been studying in reverse engineering ET tech, alien tech, whatever you want to call it, for 70 years. They've also had trillions of dollars that the U.S. government doesn't know has been going into that. And I will say, of all the scientists I've met in the world from any academic institution, the scientists that get picked out of high school or college working on this technology, this is the Raytheon triangle, they are the brightest, most accomplished scientists, highest IQ I've ever met, period. But you're not going to see them at MIT and Harvard. Now,
why won't you? Where do they recruit them from?
They identify them sometimes in early, through IQ tests and other special abilities and talents programs, and then once they're identified, then they get kind of pulled over in that direction. And by the way, your top special forces guys that I know, like Jake Barber, very, very, very incredibly smart guy. He was identified as a specially gifted person as a young man, and eventually got moved into the Special Forces, Delta Force, Air Force, and then emerged as a contractor, what they used to call a NOC, a non-official cover, for the intelligence community interfacing with the partners, over in the aerospace. So he was assigned to the aerospace corporations, but also as an intelligence guy, and I know what agency he was from. So that is how it's done. But he was identified as a relatively young man, as very incredibly gifted, and he is. So the best of your Green Beret, Special Forces, Navy SEAL guys are not only amazing warriors, but the top tier of them are also very bright and very accomplished. So the same thing happens with your scientists that they want to grab up.
What is this name of the place you were talking about? And I want to go to the Jake Barber clip. What is the name of the place, the Anthill Lockheed, that picture that you showed? What's the name of it if Rob wanted to just search for it?
Well, this is the, I think the Howland, it's just the Lockheed Skunk Works test range.
Lockheed Concourse?
Skunk Works. Lockheed Skunk Works. So it's an RCS range. It's a range where they test. And I have some other images we can give you where you'll see there's what looks like a runway, right? You got a runway back here at this jetport. Mm-hmm. It's not a runway. You look at there are diamonds on what looks like a runway. That's where the man-made anti-gravity craft that Lockheed makes come up out of the ground, hover over the diamond, and then they're struck with certain directional energy weapons to see how sturdy they are and how stable they are. And most of them are hardened enough, but occasionally one goes down.
Is that what you're talking about right there?
Correct. So you see those diamonds. That is not a runway. So they come up and they float over those diamonds at various distances. And so that's where you test these objects. And they're electrogravitic, meaning they're not conventional propulsion systems. So there's no rockets, there's no jets, et cetera. I will give you the date when we mastered gravity control. It was October 1954, so I wasn't born yet. So in the elite engineering and contracting world, these have been in various stages of development in 40s and 50s, but they mastered, let's call the gyro. So that, it's some of the early UFO film footage you see, it looks like the thing is like a leaf falling. Mm-hmm. It's because that was a man-made one that wasn't stable, wasn't alien. But once they mastered gravity control, then they became stable. And by the late 1950s, early 60s, they started being used in special projects, illegal special projects, which is why Eisenhower lost control of this whole enterprise. Eisenhower was the one that got deceived, and then ultimately, on his farewell address, Eisenhower said, "Beware the military-industrial complex." He was talking mostly about this kind of operation that he couldn't talk about publicly. Jack Kennedy was going to get to the bottom of this. He fired Allen Dulles, CIA, one of the founders, and he also subsequently got assassinated. Now, whether the files that President Trump's going to release have this in it, I know, and I have people who in another country have documents to establish this. that Jack Kennedy was killed because he was going after this issue to get it back under control, the UAP issue. So, and I'm pretty certain that Robert Kennedy was killed for the same reason.
You think he was killed for this reason?
Bob, yes, I do. Yeah, I have a document. It's an interesting letter that it's in our archive. Not in here. It's in our archive from Bobby Kennedy Sr. when he was running for president in '68, and it was like about 30 days before they killed him. And it's a letter. It's kind of funny. It's archaically written. Well, it's the '60s, right? And it says, I'm paraphrasing here, but I can get you a copy of it. He says, I'm a card-carrying member of the Amalgamated Flying Saucer Association of America. This is Bobby Kennedy writing this. And I'm very eager to do this. This is very important. He really wanted to get to the bottom of it because he knew that his brother, or JFK, President Kennedy, had been killed trying to get to the bottom of this and was also planning to really clean house at the CIA. So Bobby Kennedy writes this. 30 days later, he's dead. And not long ago, I've provided that to his family, to his Bobby Kennedy's family. And actually, they had never seen this letter. I said, well, they say, how do you have it? Well, I said, this is what I have. I have this vast archive. And it's authentic. And so this goes back a long time. A lot of American history that people think they know, they don't. Whether any of that comes out, I'm sort of skeptical, actually. I'm not even sure that the files that they have
are going
to have all this in it.
I'm curious what we're going to learn about that we don't know about right now under this administration. One of the things that's interesting, what is his name? His name is Tim Burchett.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Right? You know Tim Burchett?
Oh, yeah, sure. I know.
He comes out a few days ago, and he talks about underwater UFO.
Sure.
Okay? He doesn't seem like a guy or fellow that's a exaggerator that is trying to make up a story or something like that. And, you see him on News Nation saying, yes, I've been hearing about underwater UFOs. Rob, if you got the clip on
the News Nation clip, and then I also am looking for the Tim Burchett clip.
Yeah, if you have a Tim Burchett, that's the one right there. I think, no, that's not the one. No, that's when he's calling Jim Acosta.
Right here,
right there. Go for it.
What is your message to Trump tonight?
Disclosure. America deserves to know the facts, and I believe we are not alone. I don't know at what point. I think in God's great universe, I don't believe we're the greatest thing he's ever created. I think that's very arrogant on our part. And President Trump has confided that, in fact, he will be releasing some of these, and I plan to have that conversation again with him very soon, and I would like to see that.
What is your message?
Underwater UFOs as big as football fields,
sure,
moving 100 miles an hour. He said some number that he gave, right? So what do you know? What do we know about them?
I know that we humans have ones that can go into space, through the air, through water, and very advanced ones that can go through solid matter. Now, there are also non-human ones. So this gets the crux. There's a whole section of this briefing document right here that goes through, here is a man-made one, here's a non-human one. And the differences, and Mr. Barber will confirm this, the technology has advanced so far in these operations that are being run unconstitutionally, the legacy aerospace and UFO programs, that it's very hard to distinguish a human one from a non-human one. This is dangerous. Why? Because people in the Pentagon that I have briefed who are not read into this, I mean, we're talking generals. The head of the Defense Intelligence Agency years ago had no information on this. The head of intelligence for the Joint Staff, go look up Admiral Tom Wilson. I was there, and as this whole scandal happened, because after Edgar Mitchell died, the astronaut who I'd brought to this meeting, his notes about the meeting leaked. And there was this brouhaha about the fact that I did a stand-up briefing for Admiral Wilson, who was the head of intelligence Joint Staff. And if you look at the summary that was done by, I think it was Eric Davis, who is an operative also, an intelligence operative, debriefing Admiral Wilson after he left office, it confirms that this happened. But part of what's left out is that I had given a briefing like this by courier to the admiral before I did the stand-up briefing in his offices. And I was there, my military advisor, and Eisenhower era Army whistleblower, and what happened. Now, this is like 1999. We're talking a long time ago. That I'd fly up from North Carolina and, from my, an emergency doctor and do this in my spare time. What a crazy life, man. But and he made inquiries. There were some code names on a document I had that's from the National Reconnaissance Office, NRO, runs the super secret, and it's from Nellis Air Force Base. And it was a security alert because there were some civilians trying to spy on the range where they were testing these things. And based on that, he was able to identify some of the offices dealing with this. So he called one up, and he said, I'm Admiral Tom Wilson, J2, Joint Chiefs of Staff, the head of intelligence, Joint Chiefs of Staff. They said, oh, yes, sir, we know who you are. And he started drilling them on this issue. They said, sir, we can't tell you about this, talk to you about this. And they hung up on him. He subsequently got threatened personally and was threatened with being demoted, all right? Now, that's the kind of thing done to decorated senior officers at the Pentagon who are not read into this. But imagine how dangerous it is that there are people responsible for the security of the United States, from the president and Congress on down, who either have no information or false information. And what's about to come out is going to be 1 part fact, probably 9 parts fiction. Because the guy who invented the rocket for Adolf Hitler on his deathbed said, Carol Rosin, who was his assistant at the time, is one of our whistleblowers, said that this is the reason this is going to be kept secret is that at the right time they're going to disclose it, but they're going to try to present an alien threat from outer space to unite the world in sort of this totalitarian power grab, right? Where the whole world, like the movie Independence Day, comes together to fight the horrible aliens. But the only way you can do that is to have a propaganda machine that's been running for decades. That's why I tell people, you Google this subject, I say 90% of what, and people who are skeptical, like your friend here, I go, good for you, you should be skeptical. And here's why. Because I'd say...
It's very frustrating, but...
Yeah, but 90% of everything out here on this subject doesn't add up. It doesn't add up at all. I mean, and that in and of itself diminishes the credibility of the subject. Now, the other problem is when you tell the actual truth about the subject, you discredit yourself. I was warned by a CIA guy in 1991. He said, if you tell the whole story here, the truth, it will discredit you because it's more bizarre than the fiction they're selling to the public. And that is true. And I've never, had time with you to unpack all of that. But it's a insane amount of disinformation. But remember, if you have technologies like that, Pat, and you have the malicious intent to deceive the public or officials, you can do all kinds of skullduggery, and they have. Now, most people just take it at face value. Even these whistleblowers, they are tactical operators, right? I call them a tactical operator, helicopter, crash retrieval, whatever. They don't know what's going on the strategic level from at the top of that food chain, whether it be corporate or covert government programs. And the long game has always been to blend enough information with disinformation that the disinformation is believable, but then gaslight people that there's some threat out there. I'm going, oh yeah, I'll tell you who the threat is. It's humans. Humans are a threat not only to ourselves, we've become a threat out in space. So I have a totally opposite view of it, which most people are shocked by.
So when you see this underwater UFO that this fellow's talking about.
Oh, they're they're not unusual.
Right, and he's here, Rob, if you want to play this, because CBS wrote about this. So CBS is not going to write something about this. Maybe, go ahead and play the clip, Rob.
It does seem a lot of these UAP sightings are over water. Do you think there's anything to that and the basing concepts that you were laying out?
I do. When I've talked to people, or their sonar people, and the way they hide it from us, Matt, they say it's because our sonar, I believe, I haven't been briefed on this, I'm just from what I'm putting together, but we have some secret sonar. But what's so crazy about it, like we're hiding it from the Chinese. Well, heck, Matt, the Chinese sold us the components for it. They know it's in our sonar probably better than we do. But when they tell me something's moving at hundreds of miles an hour underwater, and our capabilities are, I don't think we have anything that'll do 40 miles an hour. And these things, this one was large as a football field underwater. And this was a documented case. And I have an admiral telling me this stuff. And it just, to me,
So that's where you think the bases are, is underwater then, because of those reports?
I do. I just think traveling light years, I think it happens. I think it's possible. The vastness of God's great universe. I mean, light years, the light from those stars that we see at night left there before the time of Christ. I mean, the vastness of God's great universe is unreal. Yeah. And I'm not worried about them harming me. I mean, if they, with that capabilities, they would have barbecued us a long time ago, brothers.
Okay, let me comment a few things here.
Please.
And I'm going to be as polite as I can be here. A little knowledge is a very dangerous thing. Those accounts are 100% correct. However, I also know that not only have there been non-human craft with that capability, we have man-made ones with that capability. Now, here's an example. You have about a 300-foot diameter. This is 300 feet across, man-made. When it left, if you read the account, and this Marine, went to the Senate Intelligence Committee.
May I read that?
Went to the Senate Intelligence Committee and to Aero at the Pentagon, the office set up to research this. All of his evidence was sanitized and distorted by Dr. Kirkpatrick, which is a big problem. Fraud was being committed there. But when this left, this 300-foot diameter, it left like a spark off a grinding wheel. It went up. It sounded just a little bit like a transformer over the horizon in a couple seconds. We're not talking hundreds. We're talking hundreds of thousands of miles per hour. No sonic boom. Why? Because they create an electromagnetic field bubble in space-time that they move through. Now, that's human. So what people are going to have to get their heads around is that a B-2, and you know what Admiral Wilson said at the end of that briefing? I said, we really need your, now this is 1997, 27 years ago, and 28 almost in April. And I said, sir, we need your help to get these programs under control because they are an existential threat to our nation and to life on Earth. Not the ETs, but these covert, deep state criminal enterprises. And he said, well, doctor, here's what I've learned. They have technologies that can do circles around the best thing I know I have, and that's a B-2 stealth. I said, yes, sir, they do. He says, then it's point, set, match. It's over. So he backed off of it. This is Admiral Wilson. Now, one of the big problems is this has happened over and over in meetings I've been taking with people all the way back to the director of the CIA for Clinton. But to Clinton's credit, Clinton actually did stand up a very, and probably the best in modern times, effort. It was called Team Red, to penetrate these black illegal projects. Team Blue would be your conventional military. And this was an entity that could be inserted and kind of switch both ways, right? The problem with that is that Team Red was eventually all absorbed into Team Black, or they were killed. Now, I'm working with someone who was part of Team Red as a young man in 1995. But that enterprise went south very badly. And
what do you mean?
It was destroyed. And it was parts of it, I think, were a bloodbath, from what I understand. So, of course, it was very clandestine. It was an attempt to penetrate illegal black projects within our own country. But you're talking 30 years ago now. But President Clinton really did try to fix this, although he never talked about it publicly. And that's kudos to him. And then he backed off because it was just too dangerous. So here's the big problem with any administration, because I've read between the lines, been doing this a little while. They don't know enough to make a proper strategic plan. And this is why they need good advisors. I don't care if it's me, but it's got to be somebody. It can't be somebody who's going to give you 1 part truth and 3 parts misinformation or disinformation, or fold in all the scary alien stuff.
Well,
that's false, which is exactly what people like Elizondo and others are doing. So the problem is that if you have something this important, let's say just for argument's sake, let's say that everything I'm saying is true. This is all planning to come out this year through the intelligence community and a whole group of whistleblowers with the evidence and the proof. If this is handled wrong, what I've had conversations with people who have coming into the administration, they know that this will be 1,000 times worse than what went bad with COVID. It'll be 1,000 times worse than that.
Why is that?
Because if you get this wrong and it pivots the whole world in a panic, because there's non-human intelligence out there that are presented as a threat, that are abducting people and killing people and doing this, and it gets spun and mutilated into that direction, which has always been this covert group's plan. Then we're going to go into a dystopian tailspin that will be way worse than COVID. So, but if you get it right, you get the golden age. You know, there's all this talk, the golden age. Well, we wanted that in the 90s, you know. So we thought, well, if this comes out, because here's why they connect the dot to what you just said about the lost century, about the technologies. Hello, I'm Dr. Stephen Greer. I'm on Connect. If you'd like to ask me questions or learn more about the UFO, UAP issue, contact me there, and we can unpack whatever you want to know about the disclosure efforts, about covert technologies, and what's going to be coming up in the next year or so as we go forward in a large disclosure on the extraterrestrial and UFO issue. Imagine having technologies that I think for quite some time you're going to leave alone the propulsion systems, because obvious something that moves at that speed, it can be a missile delivery system. You just can't put the plans for that out on the internet and say, go build one. However, the technologies that allow for energy generation from what's called the 0 point or quantum vacuum of space-time, meaning within the fabric of the space in this room, you can generate enough power to run your building with no pollution, no electric bill, no nuclear, no oil, gas, coal, no solar. It's a whole new physics, and that's been documented and proven to existed for decades. Now, that coming out would eliminate poverty in 20 years, but it would also fix the environmental problems. And even if you don't think there's any climate change, you certainly have to admit that there are 5 million people a year dying from particulate matter in their airways and heart and lungs from burning fossil fuels. Nuclear power is even worse. You have an ionizing radiation that's around for millions of years when we don't need it. And since when can humans handle toxic material like that for millions of years? We can barely handle it for 50. So these are great solutions that would be it'd be the tide that would lift all ships economically. 3 billion people who are in poverty would come up out of poverty. Yeah. And so now there are going to be some losers. You know, maybe you maybe you own a
drill, baby, drill.
Yeah,
they're going to be like, wait a minute,
well,
you want to bring 0 point quantum?
But wait, but you know, this is not like an app that you download. This is something that's going to take decades to get out.
Doesn't matter.
But yeah, the futures market are going to go, oops, we don't need oil anymore. So, you know, I was talking to the managers of a $2 trillion mutual fund.
This is disruption at the highest level. I mean, if this is so this is the part that I'm thinking about.
But you're not going to get the golden age by using technologies from the 1800s.
Yeah, but what you're going to get if it's the 0 point quantum Invention Secrecy Act of 1951, and they release those, let's just say that is all real.
It is.
And let's say that exists, and that is released. Millions of jobs are lost in oil. Okay.
Yeah, but tens of millions are created in new industry.
I'm not, all I'm thinking about is knowing how Trump moves.
Oh, I understand.
For Trump to want to do what he does, and he's only got 4 years.
Right.
This actually, because to do what you want to do, you'll need 20, 30 years.
Yeah, but it has to start sometime.
It's not going to be under his, and then the other part is, if that 2-star general 30 years ago couldn't get you for $2 billion, Trump's administration is not going to be able to afford you. For
No, I'm not, because that was a corrupt enterprise. I work with anyone who's honest because I'm a very honest person.
Yeah.
But the problem is, most people have a price where they can be blackmailed or bribed or threatened, and then they flip. And I've seen this happen amongst colleagues in the UAP research world too many times. But I actually think Mr. Trump and others around him are more forward-thinking than that, because it's not a mutually exclusive thing. On the one hand, to supply the energy needs of the planet, we do need more energy. On the other hand, standing up heavy industries to replace the current infrastructure is a very long-term issue. So you can create a strategy, if you're smart, where the one sort of is a glide down slowly, and then the other one goes up. Because no one is going to be like wiggling their nose and instantly every car. I mean, just take how many cars. You have 1.5 billion cars on the road. We create 100 million motor vehicles a year. It would take 15 years to retool, and that's if you turned it on a dime.
15 years is not a long time, though.
Well, it's a long time in the history of a world going sideways geopolitically and environmentally.
What I'm saying is you have no idea how bad I personally felt. Like if I'm a president today,
yes,
and everybody wants to go see what's going on, John F. Kennedy, RFK, MLK, aliens, all this stuff, I'm going straight to the Invention Secrecy Act and 1951. I want to know what they have there, the 6,000 patents or whatever. It's a little over 6,000 that they have in there, right?
Correct.
I'm going straight there. Then I'm asking myself, with a handful of advisors that are in there saying, if we release this 0-point energy or what is it called, Rob? Some of the other ones that are out there in the Invention Secrecy Act, that's one of them. If we release these, how big of a disruption will it be to the world, not just what we're doing in the States? Well, this one's going to kill off this many jobs. This one's going to kill off that many jobs. Got it. And then you have to almost sit there and ask yourself, if you release it, it's chaos on top of chaos. It's like software. When you release a great idea or software and it's out there and others can get access to it, it's done. You can never take it back.
Right.
When they invented a nuclear bomb, you can never take it back again.
Right.
Now it's out there, right? If they go this direction, I mean, this is bigger than preventing Big Pharma from advertising on TV.
Oh, this is massive. But also, what's the human future without it, right? I mean, I have 12 grandkids. It's like, what kind of dystopian situation are we with 8 billion people trying to live on this planet and destroying our own nest because people can't think past 6 months from now. People can't think, this whole Philistine mindset that you can't think past the bottom line of some mega corporate interest, which, by the way, are the same transnational interests that have wanted to keep this secret. It's not in the interest of the American. Go ask to the guy driving an F-150 pickup truck as a carpenter, and what he makes and what if he would like to have something in his vehicle that has an infinite range, doesn't have to be plugged in, and has quote-unquote free energy. They do. So what is in the interest of 99% of the population of Earth? Now, is there a very small number of people who wouldn't like this? Yeah. Too bad. The horse and buggy makers didn't like the Model T. And the typewriter companies and Royal Typewriters went out of business because they didn't get on the digital revolution. At a certain point, I agree with what you're saying. I'm not saying this is trivial. In fact, I had a conversation. You want to hear a funny story? So I'm sitting out at Lawrence Rockefeller was the brother, David Rockefeller, of Chase Manhattan back then. And we're out there, this is in September of 93. And at that time, the Rockefellers didn't know that, I was scheduled to brief the CIA director for the new president. And I was out there at his ranch in the Tetons, the JY Ranch. Late one night, he comes out, and he's like in his 80s. And he says, Dr. Greer, the implications of this are so vast and so profound that no aspect of life on Earth will be unaffected by it. I said, yes, Lawrence. That's why it's been kept so ruthlessly secret. This is why they kill people. This is why they have violated the Constitution. This is why they've killed a president, at least one. And I know of a prime minister in the United Kingdom where he and his whole family were threatened to be killed because he was digging into this. So that kind of thuggery, you're going to let go unchecked while the world burns and half the world's population is in poverty. This is ridiculous. It's inhumane. So, but he said, he said, look, I agree with you, but my brother, David, Chase Manhattan, he's jumping up and down on my, excuse my language, my nuts, is what he said, because I'm even having this meeting with you and some other researchers. So I said, yeah. So here we are, 31 years later, still having this conversation with the world going to hell in a handbasket, and no one doing anything about it. So at a certain point, here's my attitude to this. If the leaders won't lead, the people should lead. And this is why, if you talk to these guys who are defecting from these black sites, one of their main objectives is exactly what I described, is to start an entity to bring these technologies out, the ones that can be brought out safely, that would be for peaceful use of energy, and also technologies that would assist with healing, health and healing. And those exist. Let those come out, keep the things that fly, classified, which they should be until the world's more stable. But you can't just keep this in a box forever. The other problem is there are elements in Russia and China who have this technology, and if they move this out to the world before us, then we're going to be bringing up the rear. So if people want America to lead in technology, they can't just keep their heads stuck in the ground. This is all going to come out.
Do you think he knows about the Invention Secrecy Act of 51?
Who?
President Trump.
I honestly don't know. I honestly don't know if anyone in his inner circle does. But he would certainly understand about classified patents. I mean, it's very common.
Who is the head of protecting this right now? Whose lineage does this go under? Whose report responsibility does this go under?
Oh, it's a diversified, it's global, number one. It's not just U.S. And it's a lot of, the usual suspects in
No, but in
corporate.
U.S., somebody has, like, for example, if my job is to protect the
secrecy.
Smithsonian, my job is to, the decision to classify new inventions under the Act is made defense agencies as defined by the President. These agencies include Army, Air, Navy, Air Force, National Security Agency, Department of Energy, Department of Homeland Security, NASA, but even the Justice Department has played its role. But Rob, who do they report to? If the government determined the idea
see, this is the mythology. The mythology is that we have an intact government. No, the bureaucrats who are corrupt make these determinations. President isn't reviewing patents. Now, I have a whistleblower, Dr. Thomas Falone, who was in the patent office, a physicist, and he witnessed perfectly good patents that would help humanity with energy and things like this being confiscated, illegally abusing the Secrecy Act. He blew the whistle on it. He can't talk about it anymore because he got a settlement from the patent. But I have his original interview, and it's in our archive. Go to Disclosure Project Intelligence Archive, dpiarchive.com, and look up Tom Vallone, V-A-L-L-O-N-E, and you'll see what he had to say about that. So, yeah, there's enormous opportunities. Yeah, a wonderful guy.
What did he say?
I did that interview at my home in 2000, so 24 years ago.
What did he tell you?
Well, he told the story about what he observed and what was being confiscated. He talked about the electrogravitics and the energy, and he was appalled, and so he blew the whistle on it, and they fired him. So because they fired him, he saw that it was an illegal abuse of those powers. So one of the problems is the oversight people in the Congress are not told about this, and the presidents aren't told. So you have this what they call the fourth branch of government, the bureaucracy, in these covert programs who are calling all the shots. They're calling the shots. They're making all these decisions without the knowledge or consent of the American people or even our representatives. So this is where, do you want to live in, a totalitarian state? I got news for people. On important stuff like this, it's already a totalitarian state. But on the things that, we think we have some control over, it's the periphery. It's not the essential information. And so what we need to do is re-empower democracy and the presidency and the Congress with the correct information. And then the people need to then voice what they want out. So now, are there going to be decisions? I 100% agree. If you go all the way back to the 90s, we recommended to President Clinton and his team that not all these technologies by any means can be come out all at once. but there have to be at beginning the process, because otherwise we'll be here another 100 years sitting on a ruined planet with this as being, because a bunch of money-grubbing CEOs and investors in Wall Street don't want the truth out, right? Or transnational corporations. So to get this fixed is going to take some real courage. And what you alluded to is another level of courage, because you're going to have to say to some of your friends who are in the energy sector, well, had a nice 200-year run with the old industrial revolution, time for a new industrial revolution, time for a golden age. And that's what needs to happen. Now, you may say it can't. I think it's
not about I can't. It's not about it can't. Trump is very good at keeping everybody uncertain, but, semi-promises where if you do this, so like getting multiple plates that are spinning.
Right.
That are about to fall off, and he still keeps them.
Oh, yeah.
And then spins them a little bit more, and they're about to fall off, and he spins them again. This would be 20 plates fall on the same day. That's what would happen with something like this, and that's not his style, because okay. So let's actually process this. What would the legacy?
What you're assuming that the presidency is omnipotent, and that there aren't other powers out there. It's a false assumption. And what I'm saying is that if our leaders don't get on the right side of this, this decision will be taken away from them. So I would suggest that they think long and hard about resisting the winds of the universe, the course of history. You have to manage it, but you can't just keep kicking the can down the road. That kicking the can down the road has gotten us where we are, and all kinds of problems, whether it's the Middle East and oil and our dependency, or the environment, or the oceans being polluted, or the health being destroyed by many of these items that we don't need to be using. I mean, there's a plethora of problems. And what everyone wants to do is kick the can down the road. I am not unsympathetic to the fact that this would be, quote unquote, a disruptive technology. But at the same time, I look at what the future is without it, right? So let's do a risk-benefit analysis on that, right? We do it as doctors all the time. What's the risk of this treatment versus its benefit? The risk of letting the status quo prevail where we are is that we're really headed towards a very damaged planet and a very unstable populace where there's growing poverty and not enough, the whole have and have-nots battle.
So you don't believe the president is the most powerful person in the world?
Oh, no.
Okay, so when I asked him
Well, I mean, he's the most powerful acknowledged one, but the people in this organization have more power.
So here's what I asked him. I want to get your reaction from this. Rob, if you want to play the clip, did you catch when it was? It's 1 hour, 10 minutes, and did you find it, Rob?
Yes, give me 1 second.
I think it's 1:10:08.
Yep.
Watch this clip
There
here.
you go.
Who were the people
I
that are
get
like,
it.
oh, I got you. You have, I
get
never
it.
thought you had power. Who actually has
The
power?
most powerful person by far, the president. Power over everybody. Power. The power is enormous.
Most people don't believe that.
It is. But there is a sort of a deep state. And a lot of that's people that have been there. And then there's some bad guys. There's some bad people. Then there's a radical left, which I think are more dangerous in many ways than the other countries. I really do. Guys like Shifty Adam Schiff and other people. They're bad people. They're sort of sick people. Not stupid people either, by the way. Smart
Of course,
people.
sure.
But they're vicious. But they're very bad for our
But is
country.
Adam Schiff powerful?
Can you imagine? Well, he made up the Russia hoax. He and Hillary.
What I'm saying is, who is their boss? Who calls them and say, you better or else?
I think it's an amorphous group. It's a group. It's not one person. It's an amorphous group of lunatics. And when they come together, they're pretty bad. But let me just say this. The president has the absolute, if the president is, now Biden doesn't know he's alive, so I don't think I really believe they used him as a vessel.
You can pause it right there. You agree with them?
Yes, in terms of an acknowledged position, the presidency is the most powerful. So the president is the office of the president, but you only have the power you use, right? So let's talk about that. If the biggest secret in human history and the most corrupt enterprise in the United States history, which is what we're talking about with these legacy operations dealing with UAPs and UFOs, is unchecked. And they have the ability to move the chess pieces around, to ignite wars, to ignite terrorist attacks, to create all kinds of problems. You have the power to checkmate those folks. But if you don't use it, then you don't have it. Use it or lose it. So the president, the government of the United States, and here's something I would like to bring up. We have in here, I've given you prima facie proof of criminal activity related to this subject. Where is the FBI? Where is the Department of Justice? Where is Congress and where is the White House? Nowhere. So one of the problems is, let's take, for example, something that's going to upset you. If it doesn't, it should. If you're, let's say that you're in one of these remote areas in the desert and you're using these assets to kind of target non-human craft, and then you have an electromagnetic pulse weapon to knock it and bring it down.
Right.
They put up what's called a TFR, which is it's just a temporary flight restriction area over the operating zone, because they're not up all the time. Some places are permanent flight restriction, others are temporary. When they put those up, and this is from the people on the ground operating the systems that are whistleblowers coming forward, sometimes there'll be like these small jets back here, in planes, that'll stray into that TFR. They just blow them out of the sky. They knock them down. They kill all the passengers. They then incinerate them to dust, powder, and that's it. Even worse, these whistleblowers have said that sometimes that electromagnetic pulse beam goes outside the TFR, and they take out people who are trying to obey that restriction. Now, this has happened more than a few times. In fact, one of the gentlemen who's coming forward has ferried what they call the biologicals, meaning the dead bodies of these victims. Now, that's happening in U.S. airspace. Anyone listening from the FBI and DOJ, would you like to enforce the law for once? No. Instead, they're going to chase political, whatever. I'm telling you right now, there are so many horrific crimes being committed. Murder, abductions posing as aliens. It's all illegal. Knocking aircraft out of the sky. And by the way, the use of an electromagnetic pulse weapon is forbidden by the International Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, right? So the whole thing is a criminal enterprise. Never mind that the money going into these operations is flat out embezzlement that goes to an approved congressional and presidentially overseen program. And those funds go in, and 70% of them go out the back door into an illegal operation, building this. So here's a Raytheon. This is a Raytheon triangular shaped object. This whistleblower, it was in California in 2000, was abducted by it, and 100% of the people who'd see this thing would swear it was alien. It had a component of AI, almost biological in nature, and it was a Raytheon device. Now, this whistleblower was grievously injured by this, as it was his wife. Innocent people. He was an Army guy at, I believe is it Fort Lewis? Yeah. Or no, I'm sorry, Fort Irwin in California, on a routine range. And these Raytheon guys took him out to show him something, just to see what his response would be. And it was one of these craft. But he was told not to take night scope binoculars. He did. So, and he was able to see the whole structure of it, but then he was able to see there was a whole flotilla of them that were all holographically being projected out. So it looked like a whole bunch of ships when it was one. Then, because he saw what he shouldn't have, they subsequently abducted him and basically tortured him. Now, I've spoken to a number of people that have had this happen. So in what universe is this okay for the Criminal Investigative Division of the Pentagon or the FBI to not pursue these cases? You have direct evidence. You have direct whistleblower testimony. We convict people of murder every day for less than this, Pat. And yet they get away with impunity. So, yeah, the power of the presidency is amazing. But if you're not going to use it for something like this, then what are you going to use it for, right? So I think at a certain point, this is where my frustration with this, having been in the trenches doing this as a trying to make some sense out of this for 35 years. I started my project in 1990 when I was 34. I'm 69 now. So you get into this question of, well, will it be another 80 years before this comes out in any effective way? We're going to sit on our hands? Well, if not now, when? And if not this president, who? And if not the Congress, who else? I mean, you're going to let Russia or China take the lead on this?
They won't.
No.
Neither one of them will. Nobody will do this.
Well,
the only
we better. Here's a punchline. I hate to interrupt you. I have 3 separate people don't know each other that have been in comm centers, communication centers, where somehow they have intercepted traffic communications, non-human intelligence craft, where because at the rate at which we have reverse engineered ET technology and now have turned it into weapon systems against them, there's a red line that we're going to cross. And in other words, if we don't fix this problem, there are forces out in space way more powerful than anything, and certainly more powerful than the president. And am I saying this as a warning? I am, because I know for a fact that we have crossed that red line, and we are using technologies that are extraordinary against these people. And at what point? Now, they're not hostile, but they're also not going to let humans, who are a bunch of psychopaths and sociopaths who run these programs, and they are, just run amok out in space and be a threat to assets that are not human. So we have this very egocentric view of humans, like we're just the be-all and end-all, like Mr. Burchett was saying, Congressman Burchett. It's a big universe. And, you know, we're going to have to learn to live together in peace on the planet, but also in space. Because when you cross the nuclear threshold, and that's what we've done with these technologies, you're talking about systems, when they're weaponized, that are much more destructive than a thermonuclear weapon. And those are in the hands of the worst possible people. They are not under the control of we, the people, and our representatives, or the president or Congress. So anyone who thinks it is are very badly mistaken.
Well, let's transition into a few other stories. A couple selfish things that you and I didn't talk about last time. Moon landing. A lot of the stuff that's coming up with moon landing.
Yes, yeah.
More newer things are coming up, you know, stories. You see these clips, okay? And some of these clips I watch, I mean, I know you got opinions on this and you've spoken about this before. Rob, if you can show this one that I just sent to you right now from 1969. These are claiming these are deleted scenes from 1969 moon landing. Whether this is true or not, I don't know. Whether this is Photoshop or not, I don't know. But I've seen these pictures and these clips all over the place. This is one of them showing, if you can play the clip, Rob, go for it. Watch this.
I'm going to step off the left now.
So lower the audio a little bit, Rob. It's very loud. This is first take.
One giant leap. So, I guess you want to do it again. Okay.
You can pause it. You see this clip.
Right.
I don't know if it's true or not. You know, they made the additional movie talking about the fact that, you know, that movie that came out, you know, what was the name of the movie, Rob?
Fly Me to the Moon?
Fly Me to the Moon is the name of the movie.
Right.
That, hey, while they were landing on the moon, they rented a different storage place and hired this lady that was a big propaganda lady who was good at conning other people, her and her mom.
Right.
And let's fool people into how this happened. Where are you at now with the moon landing? Did it happen? Did it not happen? Elon's very excited. The fact that president is excited. You know, he talked about it during the inauguration. You know, how much has your position changed?
Oh, well, I've always known that both stories are incorrect. All right. So this is the master of how these counterintelligence games are played. So my uncle worked for Northrop Grumman his whole life and was on the team that designed that lunar module that landed. And he had no knowledge of this kind of skullduggery. He was an aerospace engineer and a project manager it was Grumman, became Northrop Grumman. And, but I got to know a number of astronauts, Apollo astronauts. What's more important, and this sets the stage for this, Pat, is that if you go to our whistleblower collection, and it's in here, some of it, but on our website, it's the full interview, a man named Carl Wolf, very credible man. He was at Langley Air Force Base at a National Security Agency relay station. And a piece of equipment broke, and he was brought in to fix it. And it was a compartmented area that he had never been allowed in, but they needed this fix. So he goes in. Two things that stand out in his interview. One, the operating center was almost like a international UN. There were people in there speaking various languages. This was on a U.S. Air Force base, and this is in '68. Now, what were they doing? They were looking at the early digital images from the lunar orbiter. So the lunar orbiter is what went around the moon and was mapping it, right, prior to the landing. In those images, he saw them with his own eyes, and I've heard other accounts, were ancient and modern structures that were already there, sort of in the area between the light and dark, sort of in that area. And he said they were very clear, crystal clear. I've heard this from other people. So what I understand is that when we were going to land, they knew there was a fair chance that if we landed, we may not be alone, and that might be seen by 500 million or 1 billion people, whatever it was, in '69 during the lunar landing. So they had to have, in case that happened, and it did. So what Neil Armstrong said to a friend of mine, and also I know Buzz Aldrin knows this, his sister has confirmed it to me, but he won't talk about it, is that there were all these UFOs that were in the area of the landing. So they switched to something they had filmed that was then relayed in, because there was a big time relay. Everybody thought they were seeing that in real time. There was enough time to switch in other footage. And they had to, because they were trying to keep the UFO issue secret. So did we go? Yes. Did what happened get disclosed? No. And I have people, I haven't seen it. I have people on my team who've seen the actual footage and of what was up there. So there's a lot to unpack here. And the question is, the old structures that were there looked very ancient, according to Carl Wolf. But there was newer ones that almost looked like a more modern structure. I think those may have been human from these covert programs. Because remember, we had if you go into our briefing document, there's something called the ARV, Alien Reproduction Vehicle, from the Norton Air Force Base Air Show of 1988. And it's beautiful artist rendition. So we have a firsthand witness who, Brad Sorensen, who didn't like the fact this leaked out, who was there at the Norton Air Show. And here are these, in a hangar at an air show, are 3 man-made UFOs floating. There was one I think about 25 feet, one around 50, one about 100 feet. And those had Mercury-era components inside. They were for four men inside. And the Mercury era would have been late 50s, early 60s. And they had scorch marks where it appeared they had been out of the solar system and around. Now remember, we didn't land on the moon until 1969. But these objects that were man-made electrogravitic propulsion systems in craft were operational in the late 50s, a decade earlier. So there's a great deal here that the public doesn't know. There's a lot of mythology, there's a lot of truth, there's a lot of fiction. What my job has been, I call this the disclosure mosaic. It's like you're making this mosaic. And so I have debriefed nearly 1,000 of these sort of whistleblowers and trying to put together the picture the best I can, because I have no official standing. I want to be very clear. Everyone thinks I'm some sort of CIA operative. I have never gotten an Indian head nickel from the government. Don't want to. I've paid millions of dollars in taxes, but I've never gotten anything. But fine. The fact is that these people that I've debriefed, they all have a slice of that mosaic, a piece of that puzzle, because it's highly compartmented. This is true of these new whistleblowers coming forward. They were transport and security operators at these black sites for crash retrieval. Now, if they start talking about other things, It's what they may have picked up from people in the UFO subculture. But what I am very rigorous about with these guys is talk about what you directly saw, what you can prove, what are the documents, what are the photos, video, what have you. And they have that. But once they go off that reservation onto things that are part of the pop culture of ufology, that's a problem, right? And this has been an ongoing problem for the Disclosure Project for 30 years. But
Rob, what do you have right there? What's this here?
So this is from Entertainment Tonight. It's an interview they did with Buzz Aldrin. The date is 10 years ago, and this is where Buzz Aldrin talks about seeing what looks like UFOs when Apollo 11 landed on the moon.
Go for it.
I saw this illumination that was moving with respect to the stars. We were smart enough to not say, Houston, there's a light out there that's following us. So technically, it becomes an unidentified flying object.
While Neil and Buzz were on the lunar surface, Neil switched to the medical channel and spoke directly with the chief medical officer, saying, they're here, they're parked on the side of the crater, they're watching us.
I spotted a lot of stuff that seemed to not belong on the moon.
And it has very distinct features of a satellite dish. It's got the dish itself, the crater shape. It's got a long spike that appears to come out of the middle. All sorts of stuff that looks exactly like a satellite dish on Earth looks.
There's an interesting picture on the moon that does appear to show something that could be a bridge, maybe a pipe, could be an inching worm.
I have no doubt that extraterrestrials could very well have populated or made structures on the far side of the moon.
The reaction of numerous space defense officials was fear and astonishment.
And it would make sense that governments and military agencies might well be quaking in their boots, wondering who's built these structures, where are they from, what do they want?
There is one object that reminds people of a cooling tower from a nuclear power plant. Any species that could travel through the stars enough to put a base on the moon wouldn't have to blink before they could take care of us.
The other thing that is inside this lunar...
Now, here's the problem with that. By the time all these images came in, let's go back. Gravity control, October 54. Full operational craft that could go out into space, late 50s, early 60s. How much of what people reported, and this is where it gets so confusing, because you have two things going on, both of which are poorly understood: the non-human, extraterrestrial, and the super secret, covert human. So you have both. So you know what this is like? Let's say you're a doctor, and you're having chest pain. A poorly skilled doctor is going to go, oh, it's a heart attack, when it could be dozens of other things: a dissecting thoracic aneurysm, a pleurisy, pneumonia, a pulmonary embolus, blah, 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 a muscle strain. And they go ahead and treat you with TPA or something for a cardiac. So what we have to do, we have to be smart about this. We have to look at the information, all the whistleblower, all the data, but then we have to do reassessment, because people are going to leap immediately like this. Well, those were all alien structures. Mm-hmm. Well, they may have been, but they may just as well have been. And actually what Buzz and Neil saw, was that extraterrestrial or was it ours? It's like the old commercial from the 80s. Is it real or is it Memorex? Or that show. So it's like, for me, I have to go through that discernment. But if you don't have enough information, you're going to leap to incorrect conclusions. And this is the danger, is that until the whole issue is unpacked properly, how can a president or members of Congress even interpret the data they're going to be given? Because it has to be the whole truth and nothing but the truth, not, frankly, some partial curated part of the truth that is designed to spin them in some direction, right? So I think that is the real task at hand this year. In 2025, 26, I think we're going to have to deal with this in a much more rigorous way, look at the evidence and question what it is. Is it real, non-human? Is it ours? Is it something that's in between the two that we just can say we don't know, stays in the question box? So I think we have to do that. And I think for every case that comes across my desk and whistleblower, I'll listen to what they saw.
Yeah.
But unless they see certain aspects of the craft or the occupants, I'll always say, well, it could have been ours. And if you weren't read in, let's say you're an F-18 pilot, like the guys who with the Tic Tac and that UFO, you're not read into the most advanced technology that Raytheon or Northrop or Lockheed Skunk Works has. You wouldn't be. Why would you be? When the chairs of the Senate Intelligence Committee aren't. You're not. So you have, and people will make these sort of quick, oh, wow, I saw a UFO. Well, you saw something unidentified, but you cannot say it was alien. Now, this is important for the public, everyone listen carefully. If they start rolling out the false alien invasion stuff, keep this in mind. Is it actually from outer space, or is it from this covert group, which as of this date remains unchecked in its power and unrivaled in the technologies they have, and therefore have both the intent and the ability to hoax, I'll just be blunt, anything they want that would look alien when it isn't. So I think people have to be very skeptical. I tend to look at all this stuff and go, yeah, well, you know, if you believe that, let me sell you a bridge to nowhere.
You know what I like about when I talk to you is I don't take it and I say I 100% believe what you're saying or whatever. You know, for me, I'm a skeptical guy, not because of you. I'm just a skeptical guy. Period.
Yeah, I am too.
But I say it's a different angle. Never thought about it that way before. It's a different angle. You always have a different, unique perspective for the audience to consider. So with what just happened recently with the two planes, the chopper, you know, crashing into the plane, American Airlines.
Terrible.
60, what's the number, Rob?
67.
67 at this point. You've seen this clip.
I flew right over the crash site to come here to see you last night.
Wow.
Yesterday. I flew right over it. Yeah.
Did you? Was there still a lot of
there were still retrieval operations. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So they haven't gotten all the bodies.
What is there anything you look at this where you say something's weird? It could be this. It could be that. Or look, it was just an accident. You know, there's so much traffic that's going on there. What's your conclusion on what really happened here?
I have no intelligence on this beyond what you have found in the news. I've heard whisperings, but at this point, obviously, there was a chopper in the wrong place at the wrong time. I don't think the American Airlines pilot did anything wrong. I'm a little baffled why the collision warning system didn't have him pull out. But yeah, the rest of it is to be determined. So, I mean, and I think it's best not to jump to any conclusions about it. But I do know, well, you know, just springboarding off of that, we have had accidents and tragedies happen where the cover story was they'll blame it on the aliens. You know, it's like a baby with a dirty diaper. You know, you blame every smell on the baby. You know, even if it's from you, right? So, like for example, in the 1980s, the Cash Landrum incident. You can put that. We have this great, and this was all in the news. And these people were on this highway. And it was a boy, 5-year-old boy, and his mother and his aunt in a car outside Houston. And this object descends, and it's got all this flaming stuff coming out of it. Here it is, and it's in here is a very good full description of this incident. Reported in the mainstream media, they were radiated with a huge amount of radiation and got very sick. And they tried to sue the government. Government says, we have no knowledge of this because the mainstream government didn't. This is the secret government. This is the parallel government. This is the uber deep state government. So this device, here's the story. We have an Air Force Office of Special Investigation whistleblower who was the principal investigator of this incident. He was based out of Kirkland, AFOSI. This device came out of Area 51. It was an extraterrestrial vehicle that we had retrieved that we couldn't figure out how to get the energy system running, so we foolishly put in a portable nuclear device. It malfunctioned there outside Houston, north of Houston, and spewed all this radioactive waste, and this is proven. It then continued westward trying to go back, and it went, we believe, into Fort Hood. Now, that is a major ecological disaster because that ionizing radiation will be around there for hundreds of thousands or millions of years. And nobody even knows what the footprint or the spray zone of that nuclear material is even to this day. But the UFO research community said, see, the aliens came and did this and injured all these people. So this is where they talk about UAP injuries. Well, it turns out UAP is a vague term, or UFO, unidentified flying object. Well, was it ET or was it one of ours? But it's very convenient for the intelligence community to let the public think it was alien and drop that safe on the heads of the ETs when it was a mishap of their own making. It was a foolish, and by the way, this has happened multiple times. The whistleblower just came forward, was transporting a crate, and he didn't know what was in it, but his whole team got radiated and got deathly ill. And he assumed it was NHI. And I texted him on an encrypted system. I said, with all due respect here, that was one of our nuclear devices that we occasionally put on satellites or on experimental aircraft that went bad. And this is a fact. You can fact check this. So, in fact, Colonel Heckert, who is one of our witnesses who was at the National Press Club, he was a decorated Air Force guy. He was called in on a mutual assist he was based out of Alaska for a while. And there was a satellite that came out of this, that fell out of the sky that had a nuclear power plant on it that went into a lake in an area up there in that part of Canada. I think it was Yukon. And he has his whole account. He was operational on that retrieval. And of course, it's very deadly. Now you could say, well, see, the aliens came and radiated the Earth. No, it was a human mishap. But what a great cover story, right? So that's the other part of this, the whole counterintelligence part of this, where something can be used as a foil or a deception to cover up something that's, so something that went sideways of human nature. So those are the sort of things.
So you're saying there could be a possibility of this crash that's a cover-up for something else?
Oh, no, I'm just springboarding.
That's a different story that you're
talking about. I'm just talking about.
You have nothing about that one.
No, about this recent event.
Right.
Except that, I know nothing about that. I don't want to.
Well, let me ask you this other question. With the OpenAI whistleblower, are you following that story or not really?
No, I have not.
Okay, how about DeepSeek and ChatGPT? Are you following that story or no?
I just know of the AI systems. I've had some AI people approach me. And in fact, at one of it was at RFK Jr.'s presidential ball. A guy came up to me who was an AI executive and threatened me and said I should stand down if I knew what was good for me, et cetera. He was kind of a spooky dude. I didn't get his name. I'm bad with names. But I said, look, we're going to have to deal with that. I gave him my card. I'm not, people threaten me all the time. But he was an AI guy. And there's some skullduggery going on there, but that's not my expertise at all.
Got it. Last one here, unless if you have any other thing you want to talk about. The Trump's uncle, you hear about what he had access to. What do you know about it? How deep is that story?
I honestly don't know. I know he's brilliant, MIT. I think he had 2 PhDs perhaps. Very, very smart man. Given the work he did, he may have been read into some of this. But again, it's so compartmented. I mean, one of the frustrations I've had is, I'll meet with a scientist in a SCIF, a secure compartment information facility, and they're working on very deeply in one narrow area. And they don't know anything about what's here or here. The left and the right hand don't even know they exist. And so if he had any involvement with this, it would have been within a very narrow scope of work, because that's the nature of compartmented operations. And this is one of the problems when it's like a puzzle palace, that book about the National Security Agency. With this issue, to unpack it properly, you've got to come at it from 1,000 different directions of sources, methods, whistleblowers, evidence. That's what I founded the Disclosure Project 35 years ago to get to the bottom of this. But, and every time you think you hit the bottom, you find there are 15 more sub-basements. So it's a constant unpacking of what the facts are. And I will tell you, my opinion on this has changed a lot over the years. When I first started, I really thought all the alien abductions were alien. And then I had some special operators that said, no, we're doing that. I said, how? I had no idea we had those kind of craft. I didn't know that we had man-made things that looked like a gray alien. I had no idea that there was an intention to create the specter of fear so that someday in the future they could play that card. I think we're at the point of that card being played. And I think my big concern, And I wrote a paper in 1999. Everyone should read it. And it's called When Disclosure Serves Secrecy. And meaning when disclosure serves this illegal secret government group. And all indications are, Pat, this is going to come out in the next year or so. But all indications are also that it's going to come out with that agenda to try to create an enemy that's external to humanity to impose a global totalitarian sort of superstate. And I don't think that's a conspiracy theory. I think that's actually what this has been building up to, unless we, the people, and our representatives, and the most powerful man in the world, the president, gets to the bottom of this and takes action to fix it. So I think we're in a very dangerous situation right now because of the paucity of good information. And I think the administration needs to have a much deeper understanding of this. We were all concerned when the White House released a couple of days ago saying the drones were normal FAA approved. We know that's not true. One of the guys on my team,
I saw that,
was one of the guys
Trump
on my.
said that. You're saying specifically Trump. He commented on that, right?
Well, the White House spokesperson did, is my understanding. I don't know if he did, but he's getting inadequate briefings. Is what I'll just leave it at that. So one of the guys on my team runs a private corporate contracting entity that has contracted with Lockheed Skunk Works to go look at those, and he said, "No, this is a false flag operation." Doing all kinds of skullduggery. It wasn't just a normal. And then the media hysteria around it. People go, oh, those were aliens. 100% of those were man-made. But to say that they were all FAA approved, this and that, I have a general that I know, Holt, who said point blank that that's not the case. I think the worst thing anyone can do in an office like the presidency or Congress is to speak on something when they're being not given the facts. And this is not the president's fault. It's the problem with the people around him who may not know. He promised to give people an answer, any answer, right? And so the answer that was proffered was not quite correct. So I think this needs to be looked at. I mean, this is an example of how things go sideways. And I would offer, look, I mean, I'm hardly an invisible person. I'm happy to give everything that I have in my archive. I have 762 whistleblowers with their names and contact information I'm willing to hand over today. Anyone who wants them, who is a legitimate law enforcement or the president or an investigative committee, happy to provide it.
Last thing, just for me, when I had you on here, I think you said something about Billy Carson, and you and Billy Carson were friends. You saw Billy Carson and Wes Huff did a podcast together. Did you follow any of that story or no?
No, I didn't. No, I've known him just casually over the years. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, I was wondering because both you and Billy are pretty complimentary of each other. I wondered how you felt about the podcast that he did with Wes, but you're not aware of this podcast that took place.
No, the problem is I'm so busy, I don't look at any of these. I know it's terrible. I wish I had time.
Well, listen, I mean, he's another guy that speaks with a level of certainty that you fully believe. And it was very interesting seeing him and Wes sitting down together. It was a very successful podcast. I'm glad Billy did it. And I hope they do another one together because it either increases your conviction in certain things or makes you question other things and research more. And I thought you had another, opinion on that podcast that took place. Stephen, as usual, every time we get together, you're very interesting to listen to. Seriously, very interesting to listen to. And hopefully the next time we do a podcast, we'll actually see some progress with this.
Yes.
That I look forward to.
Me too.
Appreciate you for coming out. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Take care.
Hello, I'm Dr. Stephen Greer. I'm on Connect. If you'd like to ask me questions or learn more about the UFO UAP issue, contact me there, and we can unpack whatever you want to know about the disclosure efforts, about covert technologies, and what's going to be coming up in the next year or so as we go forward in a large disclosure on the extraterrestrial and UFO issue.